This is an event that's been in the works for a little while, and we have a very special guest here today to talk to us about some policy and stuff. Anthony is here from Abundant Housing LA. I'm a former intern for Abundant Housing LA, so I'm super excited to be here working with them again. Thank you, Anthony. Abundant Housing LA is an organization based in Los Angeles that aims to educate and advocate for the benefits of affordable housing. So there's a whole bunch of stuff that goes into that, and Anthony is here to talk about some of that today. Without much else, for me, I'm going to turn it over to him. Save some questions for the end. I'm sure we'll have some time. Jake, you want to say something?
Yeah, I really quick wanted to introduce Vanessa from Student Affairs so she can point us to some resources. Vanessa.
Hi, everyone. So my name is Vanessa, and I'm currently the graduate student for Student Basic Needs on campus. So with Student Basic Needs, our focus is really just fostering a holistic well-being by helping students eliminate like barriers such as like food insecurity and housing and economic injustice. So like we support students through like finding programs like this one we'll be talking about today. Also with just making initiatives like meal swipes and food delivery programs for our students. My laptop is currently down, but I will try to share our most recent community resource guide for spring, which has like a list of like food opportunities and housing and different resources that our students could check out if they ever mention that they have any sort of basic need.
Thank you, Vanessa. And yeah, Anthony, as you were.
All right. Thank you, Max, Jake, and Vanessa for the warm welcome, for letting me take a little time out of your week to fill you in on abundant housing and what we do and what the pro-housing movement has to do with the high cost of housing and homelessness in the first place. So I have a deck that I want to share with you. I'll tell you the story of how Los Angeles came to have a housing crisis and what you can do about it. First, before I dive in, just a quick word of background on myself. So my name's Anthony Deducis. I'm Director of Policy and Research at Abundant Housing LA. And as Max was saying, what we are is we're a pro-housing political advocacy organization that makes the case for more homes in more places. And so I use data and I use the good work of policy experts around Los Angeles and the nation to help develop our policy agenda and to make the case for policy reform and design and new laws at all levels of government in California. And so I will tell you a little bit more about what all that means. And so to do that, I'm just going to share my screen for a moment. Let me set it to full. Can everybody see this okay? Okay, fantastic. So again, I realize that this is an event about homelessness, which is closely tied to the high cost of housing in Los Angeles. Before we dive in a little bit, by a show of hands, how many of you are renters? Okay, I see a bunch of hands. How many of you feel like your rent is very expensive compared to like maybe what you're getting for it? I see at least one hand. I see two. All right. Well, I think you are correct. I mean, Los Angeles has some of the highest housing costs in the nation. And we're going to get into a little bit as to why that is and how that makes LA's other serious problems even worse, one of them being homelessness. So again, a quick word about Abundant Housing LA. We are a 501c4 nonprofit organization whose mission has to do with education and political advocacy. We advocate for legalizing housing in more places around Southern California, especially in places that have good access to public transit, to jobs, and to high opportunity, high resource neighborhoods and cities. It is part of what we need in order to solve Southern California's housing crisis. A world with more housing is a world with lower rents, more environmental sustainability, and more broadly shared prosperity, where everybody in the region has more choice about how to live and how to pursue their goals. So why are housing costs high in the first place? Well, over the past 30 years in Los Angeles, we have stopped building enough housing to meet our people's needs. So this chart here says it counts up the number of homes in Los Angeles based on when they were built, right? And so you can see on the right-hand side that just 13% of the homes in LA were built within the last 30 years. So that means 87% of the homes in the city of LA are older than I am. So you can see that clearly the pace of construction has slowed down quite a bit over the last 30 years. Now let's double click a little more closely at where these homes are being built. So what you can see here is this is a map of the new homes that have been built in LA over the past 7 years. And so Hollywood is adding a lot of homes. Downtown is adding a lot of homes. But there is an awful lot of red on this map, and red are the neighborhoods that have added almost no new homes in recent years. That's most of the city. So even though we have a lot of need, we have a growing population, we have a growing economy, we have new jobs being created, most neighborhoods in LA have pretty flat housing growth. So why would that be? Some of this has to do with our city's land use and zoning laws. So you can see on the left-hand side, we've got a map of where homes have been built. And on the right-hand side, we've got a zoning map of the city. The blue places are places where it is legal to build apartment buildings. And the pink places are places where apartments are banned. So yes, you read that map right. Apartments are banned on about 3/4 of our city's residentially zoned land. That's a lot. And that is one of the things that helps to explain why so little new housing is being built in high opportunity places like the West Side and in the San Fernando Valley. Now, of course, you'd probably want to know why that is, right? Like, why would we have a zoning map where apartments are banned in most of the city? A lot of this has to do with the political dynamic in Los Angeles and in most big cities around the country. So probably some of you have heard of NIMBYs. NIMBY is an acronym for Not in My Backyard. These are typically a small but loud and persuasive group of people who tend to be opposed to new housing development, especially near where they live. And generally, they are quite politically influential because they vote. And most city elections are pretty low turnout, so they have a disproportionate impact. Now, why do these people oppose housing in the first place? Like, why aren't they upset about supermarkets or doctors' offices or other useful things that, sustain human life, right? Some of this has to do with environmental concerns, where I think there are housing opponents who are worried about the pace of construction, but maybe they don't always think about how building more homes in cities is actually environmentally friendly compared to building them in wildlands or exurban areas where people drive everywhere. Some of this has to do with aesthetic preferences. So like some people just like their block the way it is and they don't want it to change. And that's, it's fine to like your home, but it's one thing a little bit different to try to say what everybody else's home should look like. But some people feel that that's their right. Some people are afraid of change. Some people are afraid of fast growth, and other people, there is a racial discrimination and income discrimination aspect to this, that some housing opponents understand that making apartments illegal makes it more difficult for people who are not wealthy enough to own a single family house to move into their neighborhood. And while explicit race-based discrimination has been illegal in housing policy for decades, some NIMBYs do understand that banning apartments is almost like a backdoor way to block new people from living in the neighborhood who've maybe not had the opportunity to live there in the past. So it's a complicated set of causes, but the key takeaway here is that housing opponents are powerful. And so what happens as a result of their political influence and the fact that housing is pretty scarce in Los Angeles? Well, that increases rents across the board, and that hurts everybody. But that hurts people with low incomes the most because they were already struggling with high housing costs. In Los Angeles County, there are about 750,000 renter households with very low incomes, meaning they make less than half the median income in the county. but there are only about 250,000 homes that are affordable to people who make that amount of money. So we've got a gap of we need 500,000 more homes that are affordable at those levels of income just to meet existing demand. We're not even talking about future demand right now. We're talking about the gap today. And so because of this gap, the lack of affordable housing is one of the causes of accelerating homelessness in Los Angeles. Homelessness is up 50% over the past decade in LA County, and about 60,000 people in Los Angeles are experiencing homelessness right now. No question, homelessness is complicated, but a big piece of the puzzle is the lack of affordable housing. For many people, losing an affordable home or being evicted is the last push into homelessness that a person who is already struggling can experience. And it's worth noting that nationally, homelessness is down over the past few years. And in cities where housing costs have remained stable, like Houston, Texas, homelessness is way down, over 50%. And so it is real hard to find a convincing explanation for why homelessness is so bad in Los Angeles without taking the affordable housing component into account. There are not enough homes in Los Angeles, and that is especially true of affordable homes. So what other bad things happen when housing is scarce? So you can see from these maps that Los Angeles can be a very segregated city by race. The neighborhoods in the city of Los Angeles on the west side and in the nearer parts of the San Fernando Valley, you can see from the map, tend to be the ones that have a white majority. On the other map, you can see how in South LA and East LA, these tend to be areas where people of color make up the majority. And you can also see, because like these green, blue, yellow, red maps are redlining maps from the 1930s. Hands up if you don't know what redlining is. I can explain for a second. Okay, sounds like everyone is familiar with it. But you can see redlining divided LA by race and income starting in like the 1920s, 1930s. And the housing shortage helps to keep these barriers in place today, even though they've been illegal for decades. When you make it hard to build homes, when you make it hard to build apartments, you make it harder for people of modest means, people of minority heritage to move into neighborhoods that have high opportunity, but were not welcoming to people of color in the past. So the housing shortage makes it harder for our neighborhoods to be diverse and equitable and provide opportunity for all Americans. Sorry, next slide. So you can see how all these problems are interconnected. When housing is scarce, it becomes expensive. When housing is expensive, it makes homelessness, it makes racial and economic inequality, it makes traffic and pollution worse. But there's good news. We can fix all of these problems. And it starts by creating enough housing for all of the people who live in Los Angeles or would like to live in Los Angeles. And so Abundant Housing LA has a policy agenda that rests on what we call the core four. We believe that we can promote equity and racial justice by legalizing more homes, by making homes easier to build, by funding affordable housing in order to end homelessness, not just manage it, and strengthen renters' rights, that we believe that that's the formula that will create housing for all in our city. Now, how do we do that in practice? So what does Abundant Housing do to help make the case for more homes and for greater affordability? So there's a couple of things that we do in our organization. We design better laws, and we work with elected officials and their staffs and the state housing department to make the case for these better laws. We organize our members to advocate for individual projects when there are local hearings. We write articles, blog posts, data-driven research to help make the case for more homes. We organize events to bring our members together, and we build a coalition with all kinds of civic organizations to make the case for more homes. So let me quickly just give you a little bit more information about each of these buckets. So at the heart of our policy agenda, we advocate for new citywide zoning laws and land use reform that would end the ban on apartments in 75% of our city's neighborhoods and allow apartments all over the city. Oh, sorry, I heard something, but let me continue. Now, that can mean skyscrapers in some parts of the city, but we're also talking about more modest forms of apartments too, like bungalow courts, fourplexes, duplexes. We're kind of an all of the above organization in terms of which kinds of homes we think should be built. And we especially think that we need many more homes in our city's high income, high opportunity neighborhoods that are near transit and job centers. And so here is just one example. On the right-hand map, you can see the patterns of new housing production in our city over the past 7 years. It's really just concentrated in Wilshire, Hollywood, downtown, and that's about it. What we are proposing for the future on the left is having our city's highest opportunity neighborhoods set high targets for housing growth and to change land use and zoning laws accordingly so that 300,000 homes can be built in the high opportunity parts of the West Side and the Valley. We also show support for individual projects. So in Los Angeles, a lot of times neighborhood councils will have hearings where they take a position on a new potential housing project in the neighborhood. And the housing opponents are pretty organized about showing up to these meetings. And so we also show up to provide the opposite perspective, a little bit of counterbalance, where we have members who live in these neighborhoods stand up and explain why more housing is actually good and why they support it. Because it's important that elected officials hear a balanced perspective on these issues. If they just hear from a few housing opponents, it's easy for them to assume that everybody feels that way. And we want to show them that there's actually very strong political support for more housing in our neighborhoods. So we do the hard work of showing up to these kinds of meetings, of course, on Zoom right now. We also use, hang on, this slide is not loading quite right. That's really strange. There was more here. We use, the pen is mightier than the sword, right? So we use data to make strong arguments in major publications that make the case for more homes. So over the years, we've been published on the op-ed page of the LA Times, the LA Daily News, and blogs like City Observatory and Urbanize. So we use this as an opportunity to explain why more housing is good and show support for policies that would create more housing. We organize events. Certainly pre-COVID times, this was a lot more social. We would participate in, I guess on the left, you could call that a protest, although people are certainly smiling. We have social events. On the right-hand side, that's a picture of we call it our Forbidden City Architecture Tour, where we'd organize members and take a walk around classic blocks in places like Hancock Park and Los Feliz and look at all these cool old buildings that you could not build today under the current laws. And so this is a great way to bring our members together and to welcome new people to Abundant Housing LA. And finally, nobody can be an effective advocate alone. And so that is why we've partnered with a diverse array of community organizations across LA to together make a case to our elected officials for transformative housing policy and growth. So we work with environmental organizations, we work with government reform organizations, small business organizations, affordable housing developers, architects, urban planners and designers, democratic clubs, and together we make that case with one voice for more homes. Now, if this sounds like something that you want to get involved in, number one, we should talk because we would love to have you get more involved. And number two, if you're interested in addressing the housing crisis, if you're interested in building a city that has much less homelessness, that doesn't have housing scarcity, that has good quality housing in great locations, that is affordable at every budget, if you want less traffic, if you want more equitable sharing of opportunity and to have more welcoming neighborhoods, and you want our city to be on the front lines of building a more environmentally sustainable world, then advocating for more housing in our city is a great way to do all of these things. So let me stop here. I'm going to stop sharing my screen for a moment. We can come back to it in case there are slides you want to ask questions about, but this is a good time for me to answer your questions, I think. Yeah, go for it.
When you're talking about the increased pollution from cars, so are there parking structures that are not being utilized, and so like that's a waste of resources, or is there I think I missed it.
No, you didn't miss anything. I actually should have put a slide on this that explained the link between high housing costs and pollution better. So
I get the littering part. I just wasn't sure how the cars factored in.
Oh no. So my point is I should have explained this more properly with like a slide, because it's a good question and I could see why it would be confusing without more context. So when the cost of housing increases in convenient locations near jobs and near transit, people who are priced out move further away from jobs and they tough it out with a longer commute. When you're priced out of Santa Monica, when you're priced out of and you work in the West Side and you move to East LA, you've now put yourself into a rough 1+ hour commute each way, 25 miles each way.
Oh, that makes sense.
And so like in Northern California, you have like this particularly awful trend where you have like these super commuters who, because the Bay Area is so overpriced, like everywhere in the Bay, you have people driving from the Central Valley 2+ hours to San Francisco or to Silicon Valley. And so that same dynamic is starting to happen in LA as well. So of course that creates traffic and pollution. The other thing too is that denser cities are better able to support mass transit usage and walking, biking. It becomes just when people can be like in close proximity to jobs, friends, stores, restaurants, bars, it becomes a lot easier to live a lifestyle that's not dependent on the car. And so that's why when you look at like greenhouse gas emissions per person in like a suburb versus a city, it's always like significantly lower in big cities that have like reasonably good mass transit. I also see a question. Oof, Jake, I feel sorry for your sister. That's a rough commute. That is not fun. Santa Clarita to Santa Monica, that's hideous.
I had a question. I know that in the past, that abundant housing was sort of trying to organize and develop membership groups in the community who could represent their area. And I'm just curious where you're at with that now. Do you have the whole LA region covered, or how is that going?
Oh, no, that's a great question. We have so in addition to our City of LA focused members, we have very active chapters in Santa Monica, Culver City, South Pasadena, and Alhambra. And we're working closely with some of the more established housing advocate groups in Pasadena to sort of raise our profile there. We're also getting a group up and running in Torrance. Our organizing director actually just moved on to a role in urban planning, so that's expanding more as a bid on pause until we get a new organizing director. But you're absolutely right that LA County is so big that we want to be able to start founding more of these local chapters so that we can have a greater impact in some of these smaller cities where having that more direct tie to elected officials and on the ground knowledge is really important.
I'm thinking particularly, because I was aware at one point of some difficulty getting new housing built in sort of the East LA cities of like Boyle Heights and Lincoln Heights, and some of those small cities in that area that were extremely opposed to bringing in any new housing. And I was wondering if you had any updates about that. They like shut down some really good projects that I still don't think have gotten built, and it wasted a lot of money because the project spent all this money and then they couldn't build.
So it's hard for me to speak in particulars on these projects. I'm not super familiar with them. I guess what I would say is that I understand why new housing in lower income areas like Boyle Heights, Lincoln Heights is particularly controversial. We generally focus our attention on, I mean, more housing is good across the board, but we try to focus our attention on the need in high income, high opportunity areas that in addition, those tend to be the places where if you change the law, housing is likeliest to get built because rents are very high. And it also tends to be the places where if you add more housing and you add more affordable housing, you're also giving people an opportunity to move from low opportunity neighborhoods to high opportunity ones. So that's kind of a win-win. Not only did you create more housing, but you also help people to like live more prosperous lives, live near better schools, live in more environmentally cleaner air locations. So that's sort of the logic there. But yes, the long story short, we're looking to build strong chapters in many LA County cities. So if you have ties to one of these cities, or you live in one of them, or you have friends who do, that could be an interesting opportunity.
I had a question, just informally,
Sure.
what made you want to work in this area? Like, was there anything that you experienced or saw that inspired you to do this kind of work?
That is an interesting question. So this is actually my first role in political advocacy or policy or the nonprofit world. I actually my career has been in the business sector and in tech. But so okay, I'll give you a little bit more background. I moved to LA about 5 years ago after graduating from the University of Chicago's business school. And I came out here and I established a career in tech and entrepreneurship at ZipRecruiter. If you know it, you probably are a podcast fan if you've heard of the company. So once I got kind of settled into LA, I found that I really liked it. And I found myself needing something interesting outside of work. That I liked my work, but something was missing, right? And as I explored LA and I kind of became really enthusiastic about the city, it reawakened this passion I had had in college for local politics and cities that I had kind of put to the side for a while as I was focused on career. And I found abundant housing because a friend of mine told me about it, because we were talking about these kinds of things like, gee, like they should really make it easier to build homes, then housing wouldn't be as expensive. Why don't they do this? And so I started getting involved with abundant housing. I liked what I heard. I got to know the team and I found them to be pretty friendly and nice and easygoing. But the thing that really made the difference was realizing that the things that I had gotten good at work, around working with data, being analytically minded, communicating complicated analysis in a way that's clear and simple for like a senior person who doesn't have time to really like get it to understand. The thing that made the difference was realizing that those same skills were also useful in housing advocacy. That people at abundant housing were like, wait a minute, you know how to do this, this, and this? Oh, you should like help us with blog posts or create interactive maps. And I found that once I started getting my hands dirty with this and applying my skills in a different way, that it was exciting and motivating in a way that went beyond the job I was more excited about this than the job I was getting paid to do. And so a little over a year ago, we brought on a full-time staff. And so that was when I was asked to become director of policy and research. And it's been very interesting so far. It's like, as you can see, it's been a good opportunity to go even deeper on making sense out of big data sets and using it to design good policies and good laws.
I just want to mention for everyone that last year we did a special project with a master's level class in English, I think, with abundant housing, and a group interviewed key people and they studied the subjects, and they were going to do a documentary. That was their assignment, to do a documentary on it. And then COVID happened and they couldn't really do the documentary. So they ended up doing a podcast, and it's on the initiative website. So if anybody's interested, you can find it there. Maybe I can, while we're still on, I'll look it up and see if I can send you the link in case you're interested in hearing it. Because I liked it. I thought they did a really good job, because we wanted the students to really understand the issues and figure out how to present them in ways that, for the general public or other students would get it. So I'll try to find that and share that with you.
Hey, Anthony, I have a question. It's going off of the data visualization stuff, and I'm so impressed with the presentation and the data you collected. So where does that data come from, and what kind of tools are there for people who want to work with data? I've had like some experience, and there's a lot of different databases, it seems, based on city or department. And I wonder if you had any tips or tricks for finding data.
Okay, so that is a very good question. I've shared my screen again because this is going to make the answer more interesting. So the example I will give you is how I built this map that counts up the number of new homes. So the city of Los Angeles has something called the Open Data Portal. And on it, their building department has a giant data set with all the certificates of occupancy that have been issued since 2013. A certificate of occupancy is like a permit that you have to get before you can have people move into a building. It's the last step in getting a building completed. And so this is all public information. Now, granted, it's a big, messy, ugly, sometimes inconsistent data set. It's probably, I don't know, between 20 or 50,000 rows. But what you can do is, I pulled it into R, which is like a coding statistical language. There's others like it, like Python. And I was able to kind of trim down the data set to the essentials, and then match it up with XY coordinates, right? Like they give you an address. There's like a website you can go to where you upload all these addresses en masse, and it will spit out the XY coordinates. And then in R, you can match it up with the boundaries of these neighborhoods, right? Like there's packages that are kind of like where it's like Google Maps kind of, where basically you can put all the projects on the map like dots. You can count them up based on how many are inside of the boundary, and then come up with a number that way. And then for the visualization you're looking at, this is in Tableau, which is it's a data visualization software. So there's no secret sauce or magic formula, let's say, but what you have to do is you have to be comfortable with discomfort, right? These data sets are never perfect. Sometimes they really stink, but there's probably something interesting you can do with almost all of them. And this is just one example. What else can I answer for you?
Are there any specific developments or legislation that you guys are supporting that you want to shout out?
Oh, definitely. So we have for the first time in our group's history, we have co-sponsored a piece of state legislation. So our hometown legislator, Assembly member Laura Friedman, she's in the California State Assembly, brought forward a bill that would make it so that new housing and commercial spaces would not have to build parking on site unless they want to. The way it works right now is that most cities have pretty inflexible laws that require you to build a lot of on-site parking with new housing and stores. So like in LA, most apartments have to have are built with 2 parking spaces because the law requires it. That's not a very good law because that raises housing costs. It's expensive to build parking, and that takes up space that you could use for more homes. It reinforces car dependence. And it leads to the construction of buildings that are kind of designed as like garages first and like public spaces second, which is not great if you're walking or you're biking or you're it makes it a lot more hostile to pedestrians. And so what the bill would do is it would say, okay, you don't have to build parking unless you want to. Decide for yourself how much is the right amount to build. And that makes a lot of sense, because then if someone does want to build a building that with parking, that's fine. They're free to do that. But if you're a small business and you'd rather use your extra space to, say, put out more restaurant tables instead of have a lot of parking spaces, you are free to make that decision for yourself. And so, like, that's one of the things we've seen during COVID, is that many cities have suspended that requirement for small businesses, which is why you see restaurants doing smart things like, you have like a strip, like there's like this wonderful like strip mall Thai place like a half a mile from my house. They took the parking and they put down like fake grass, they put tables. It's great. And I mean, that's when you allow for that kind of flexibility, I think good things happen. And it's also good on reducing housing costs, less driving, more mass transit usage. It's also just kind of beautiful to see people using the space in more interesting ways. Well, if there's, oh, sorry, Brenda, go for it.
There's one other piece of legislation that a lot of people are moving toward right now, and I wonder if Abundant Housing has a position on it. It's AB 71, which is the comprehensive approach to funding that would support the state in being able to build enough housing. I think they're talking about taxing certain level of folks.
You're talking about, this is Bringing California Home, right?
Yes.
Yeah, so we have our support letter in for that. So we're very much on, so what this bill would do is it would increase corporate taxes in California to create 2.4 billion in new funding every year on solutions to homelessness. It seems like a good use of money to me. And we've signed on with the other members of the Bringing California Home Coalition just to express our support. There are a lot of other groups whose bread and butter is homelessness prevention, and they're sort of leading on this, and we're just being supportive and adding our voices to the call for reform on how we address homelessness in California. All right. Oh, Jake, it looks like you have a question.
Yeah, I'm just trying to get as much out of you as I can. So the other side of my last question, are there policies or projects that are very bad for your mission that are happening that we could, I don't know, avoid or speak up against?
To avoid. All right.
I mean, I think single
No.
family zoning is a big one. Like that's one of your big policies. But yeah, because I know with like the RENA thing, how far in advance they plan out what is going to be built. So are there any projects like in that process that you're trying to move the city against?
So I think the right answer to your question has to do with RENA. So just for context here, RENA is the Regional Housing Needs Assessment. And what that is it's a state program where every 8 years, every city in California has to update its long-term housing plans. What happens is that the state sets a formula for how much housing growth each city needs to accommodate. And then the city has to come up with a plan for how they're going to do that. Now, of course, the devil is in the details. Cities can do a really good job planning for more housing, or they can do a really bad job planning for more housing. There are all kinds of like little tricks that cities can use to like do the bare minimum and not get sued, but also not encourage a lot of, like, I'll give you a deliberately ridiculous example. If you're, part of what this is that cities have to identify enough parcels where they expect new housing to get built over the next 8 years. And they have to create the conditions where housing is likely to get built, right? Like they can faster permitting, like allowing bigger buildings, things like that to make it attractive to redevelop these parcels. The city of South Pasadena has put out some maps where they say, look, we have enough parcels to meet our goal. Some of the things on the parcel are their police station, their city hall, their like a headquarters for their school district, buildings that are never going to get redeveloped in a million years, and they're just like counting on people to just not understand the map well enough to. Like, but we caught them. We saw that. So the cities are now in the process of releasing these draft housing elements. And a lot of the housing elements that we're seeing so far are not very good. So like, for example, the city of LA did an early version where they said they think they can accommodate 80% of the city's future housing growth without any policy changes. So they think that 400,000 homes will get built without changing any laws. Now, how's that? So, but here's the problem. Over the last 8 years, the city built about 100,000 homes. So why do they think that home building is going to, increase by 4 without changing any laws or changing any policies, right? Like that doesn't add up. Now, the reason they say these things, of course, is because they don't want to rezone. They know that rezoning single family parcels is very controversial with a small group of homeowners, and the elected officials are afraid of annoying them. And so we are helping to make the case for why it's important to allow more housing in these high opportunity areas, even if apartments are currently banned there. And one other thing I should just make clear here is that getting rid of single family zoning is very different from getting rid of single family homes. It is a-okay to have a single family home if you want to. Like I grew up in a single family home and it was nice. There's nothing wrong with it, but it's not the only choice people should have. And it's not right that the law requires that choice in most of the city's land. And so that's what we're advocating for around allowing apartments and single family homes and bungalow courts and skies, like, depending on what people really want and need and are willing to invest in, is giving people greater choice, which I think will create more affordability. But if you're asking what are we against, we're against bad housing elements that don't actually like promote housing abundance in the world.
I had a quick question.
Sure, go for it.
So you talk about like the diversity of housing typology being a great thing, and allowing people accessibility to different types of homes, therefore different variety of could be rental costs or etc. So I know that in LA that there's the small lot ordinance that they've been doing recently that is the utilizing the zoning of mostly, well, it's like between single family zoning for parcels that are for single family homes, or like R1, R2, or R1.5. I'm sorry, I'm a little I know some of the numbers.
Oh, you're fine. You know your stuff. I can see.
Yes. So I'm interested on what your opinion or abundant housing is on SLOs.
On small lot ordinances?
Yeah.
We don't actually have a formal policy on small lot ordinances, but it fits with the idea that we shouldn't mandate one home on one parcel.
Right.
And it fits with the idea that we should have greater flexibility and let people to decide for themselves what kind of homes they would like to live in. So it's hard for me to see anything wrong with that. And it seems like, not every neighborhood should have tall buildings or skyscrapers. Like there are most parts of the city, no one is ever going to build buildings that big because the demand is not there. And that's okay. Also, one of the things that I think gets people more comfortable with the idea of more homes is having, small lot homes, 2-story buildings, 3-story buildings that really fit with the way the neighborhood look. Like I live in Los Feliz, and we are hardly a paragon for housing affordability, unfortunately. And that's because we don't allow very much housing. But Los Feliz is a place where single family homes coexist next to small lot homes, next to duplexes, next to bungalow courts. And I think in a world with more reasonable zoning laws and land use laws, you'd see a lot more low density neighborhoods look more like that.
Right.
Mhm.
Totally. Thank you.
You got it.
One of the things that we are looking to do is to see whether there's interest from our USC students to get involved and like to help create a chapter. And I wonder, Max, if you want to talk a little bit about that before we finish our time.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you, Brenda. So I'm actually going to drop a link in the chat right now. That link is to a Google form. It gives you a little feedback about the program for today. Lets us know, sort of your thoughts about these issues. Also, on that form, it leaves space for you to indicate, if you'd be interested in possibly working with a student group in the future that might look something like Abundant Housing LA. A group dedicated to the advocacy for affordable housing in the city and the development of that affordable housing as a solution to so many of these things that Anthony's talked about. So if you have any questions about that, here, I'm going to drop my email in the chat because I'm probably going to be a student organizing part of it. So please, if you have any questions or interest in that, fill out that form. That'll be a great way for us to get your information. If not, shoot me an email and I can connect with you that way. That's kind of all I have on that. So if we don't have anything else, I want to thank Anthony for being with us today.
Let me just say one more thing, and that's that Anthony has been kind enough to record this session for us. And I just thought the way you presented the information was great. It was just really clear and outstanding, and wanted to let all the students who are on this the seminar today, if you know of a group that might be interested, whether it's in a particular school or even another student group or a study group, anyone that you're aware of that might want to learn more about this, we're going to have the recording and we can help you set up your own little study group or webinar and share that with you so that you can share the information. We hope, I think School of Architecture is one of them I was thinking of. And I'll be working with Jake a little bit more on, now that we have this information from the Homeless Awareness Week, how do we start to distribute it in different places so students who, whether it's poli-sci students or architecture or urban planning, other groups that might feel passionate about these issues and can learn more about it, will have opportunities to hopefully share out. So definitely let us know, let Max know, I think is probably the best thing. And then we'll support being able to do some additional small groups and large groups, whatever you guys are interested in, if you have a group of students you'd like to share it with.
I'm graduating this semester, but thank goodness. But my capstone's on homelessness for adults with severe mental illness. And I've received funding to start a nonprofit and to kind of launch my innovation. And I'd love to keep in touch because the company that I work for, we're already in a few counties in Southern California. We just bought up some vacant buildings in Riverside. We're making a hub. And then we're going forward to get a master service agreement with LA County to provide services. So we're doing some really big things. I'd love to stay involved because we're doing a lot in LA, San Bernardino, Riverside. So we're in that whole area. And thank you for speaking today. It was really interesting, and I appreciate it. But yeah, I will shoot you an email. But
yeah, and let me follow up with you, because
okay.
you know, I got my doctorate a couple years ago, and I studied homelessness as well. And I love to connect with other students that are developing things in that area. And then I also try to see how we can support it through our efforts at USC. So shoot me an email too, and I'll put my email in here. And then,
I have yours because I emailed you
oh,
earlier.
that's right. Yeah. So let's get together so I can hear more about it. Okay.
Yeah, we're looking to collaborate with students and share all this. And I mean, it's going to take a lot of people from a lot of different areas to come together. Like, one organization is not going to fix this. So I'm on the same page as you.
Well, thank you all so much for having me today. This is a lot of fun. I appreciate the kind words and the smart questions. If you want to email me, my email is in the chat. I have our website. You should sign up for emails. I promise it's only like 1 or 2 a week, and they're interesting. And please feel free to reach out. We can continue the conversation. All right. Thanks, everybody. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thank you, Anthony.